Thanks for being here. We're getting close to kickoff. It's 12:02 actually. I'm gonna kick off. So welcome to the Better Culture. We usually run these webinars every other month. So I like to call it our bi-monthly webinar series. Today's topic is one that we get a lot of questions about. We have increasingly, obviously, more and more organizations that are operating with more flexibility in their structure. They're operating in a way, perhaps trying to decrease their physical footprint and trying to, at the same time, increase the talent pool, the folks that they can hire. And that talent pool increasingly is asking for, when possible, different types of work arrangements. And so organizations and our clients, for sure, have gotten way more flexible. I would say over the last 5 to 7 years. COVID obviously dramatically escalated that for every organization. And now we have clients in all sorts of different situations with regard to working in a purely physical environment, a purely virtual environment, and everything in between. It's a new territory for a lot of managers out there, which is why we wanted to host today's topic on leading remote and hybrid teams. So welcome everybody. My name is Brett Hogeveen. I'm a co-founder of Better Culture, and I always love having the chance to visit, to chat, to have some fun with you guys as a group. So as a kickoff, that's a little bit of background here. I want to make sure I can advance my slides. There we go. Let me tell you who we are. If this is like your fifth time on our call, you've heard this before. If this is your first time on one of our webinars, our background story, we're an Omaha-based leadership development and consulting firm. And our story goes back 30 plus years to my father, actually, who was the founding president and CEO of an Omaha-based organization called QLI. QLI is an amazing rehabilitation and care provider for individuals who've had a catastrophic injury, a brain injury, a spinal cord injury, etc. And when QLI was being built in the 1980s, one of the biggest obstacles to trying to figure out how to build something like this was, how do we make this an uplifting place? How do we make this a place that's amazing for patients, for families, but not just for patients and families, but for staff? And so from day one at QLI, my father's focus was, how do we build the darndest culture anyone has ever seen so that we can attract, build, motivate, and keep great people? QLI was pretty successful at that, in that the first 5 times that they ever played in Omaha's Best Places to Work competition, they were 5 times in a row voted the #1 best place to work in the entire Omaha metro area. Since then, when my father retired in 2010, my brother and I begged him for a job for several years before he had any faith that we were qualified to do anything to be helpful. But from about 2011 or 12 forward, we started doing some small consulting, some training, working with other organizations to figure out how can we help them be better places to work? How can we develop leaders? And about 2020, we launched a digital business in Better Culture. So what we do today, we operate both Mindset as sort of a high-touch, white-glove consulting and training company, and we operate Better Culture as more of a technology-driven company, both with the same mission of improving business performance by doing 2 things: upskilling leaders and improving company culture. So if your organization cares about its business performance, welcome to the call. We try to provide solutions for anybody that's trying to build a better business, whether you're a for-profit or a nonprofit, regardless of industry. We think we can do that in 2 ways: by helping you build your leaders and your leadership skills, and by helping you build company culture, both from the top down and even from the bottom up. So that's who we are at Better Culture. Today, I've kind of given you as much background on why culture matters as I'm going to give you today. But here's where we're going to go. We're going to try to discuss some common barriers and obstacles that are faced in leading virtual and hybrid teams. And right now I want to give you that prompt, okay? I would really like, if I can, and I know this is hard on a webinar, but I would love for you guys to put in the chat for me right now as many barriers or obstacles or challenges as you can think of, or that you've personally run into in trying to operate in a virtual or a hybrid team, okay? So think about that and feel free to start throwing those in the chat right now. I want to kick off this presentation not with what I want to talk about, but with what you guys have experienced, okay? And then today, I'm going to try to respond to your comments to provide actual solutions, okay? So in a little bit, and maybe I'll riff on this while we get going, but in a little bit, I'm going to define the difference. And so please put those in the chat right now so I can see them. As you're thinking about that, gosh, Brett, what challenges have I run into? What's hard? Whether you're, by the way, the leader of a virtual or hybrid team, or whether you're just a team member on those teams, I would welcome your comments in the chat on what's hard about that. What's difficult to manage? I do want to explain, as you guys are thinking about that, what is the big difference between a hybrid team and a virtual team or a remote team, okay? And I'll have a slide on this in a little bit, but most of you, I'm guessing, could give the same definition. I just want to explain this as table stakes. Hybrid teams, for the most part, are one step evolved from in-person teams, right? There's 12 people in a team, or there's 200 people in a company, and they used to all work in the same spot. And then, oh, well, one person moved to Kansas City, but we want them to keep working with us. Or, ooh, we hired one good person from out of town, and they don't want to move to Omaha, right? And they make like one exception, or two exceptions, or three exceptions. And over time, that sort of evolves to, oh, well, actually, we have like 10% of our folks working remotely, maybe a couple days a week, maybe permanently. But it's not, the company wasn't built and the team wasn't built from day one to operate in what I call a virtual first culture, okay? Hybrid cultures tend to be in-person first with accommodations for your virtual folks, okay? For your remote folks. And that can be challenging if most of your processes, most of your communication tools, most of the way people get information, most of the way you store information is built in an on-site basis. Okay, most of the way people build relationships, it's built on an in-person basis primarily. Then we have to make exceptions to remember about and to pull our hybrid folks in. Okay, and that often is the big differentiator between a hybrid group, which is most of the time those companies are in-person primary, hybrid is kind of secondary. A remote team, a fully remote team or a fully hybrid team is a team that's built with a remote first culture. And that's very different, okay? When we're saying, well, how are we going to communicate with each other? The number one way we're going to communicate, and probably the only way, is a digital solution. How are we going to store information? It's exclusively a digital solution. How are we going to get together for a team meeting? It's exclusively a digital, remote process. And that actually has quite a few advantages in running a fully remote team because everybody's starting from the same point, as opposed to two operating systems with a hybrid team. So that's enough explanation. Let me see what you guys have put in the comments here, okay? So a couple just big picture ones right off the bat. Engagement, it's hard to engage people and it's hard to get people to participate. Thank you for participating in my chat, folks, because it is hard virtually and remotely to get people to be fully present and to participate. So thank you for putting your comments in here. Jen says, finding ways to create pop-ins instead of everything being a meeting. Right, so how do you plan for spontaneity? Right? What can we do to create that same type of spontaneous culture? Hey, I've got a question. And I could just pop over my cubicle, or I could go check in with somebody down the hall. It's a little, there are technology solutions for these things, but it is no doubt harder to create pop-in opportunities, etc. Time zone differences, got it. Jessica says for hybrid, keeping both those online and those in the room engaged. Absolutely. Jessica, I have to tell you, I do some public speaking, some keynote speaking, and I have relationships with people that plan conferences, etc. I don't know if you guys are in this room, but I'm going to paint with a broad brush here, so forgive me if you know of an exception, but I'm going to tell you, every meeting planner that I've ever talked to hates trying to run hybrid events, okay? It doubles their expenses. It more than doubles their hassle. Trying to create an event where you have both in-person people having a good experience and online people having a good experience is nearly impossible on a large scale. Now, on a smaller scale, for one meeting, you got 6 people in person, 2 online. You can do it, but you need to be intentional about how you're consistently taking a breath and pulling in those virtual folks, because they tend to disengage a bit because nobody in the room takes a breath. You have to sort of have a cadence for continuously drawing them in, etc. So I'm 100% agreeing. Hybrid is challenging in meetings. Emily says seeing engagement and participation as being challenging at times, especially depending on the size. Yep, absolutely. yeah, how do you make sure everyone feels like they're part of the team? And that in particular, I'd say, is a hybrid problem when you've got 10 people on site and 3 people off site. The 3 people off site, I mean, weeks can go by if you're not careful without those folks ever touching the 10 folks on site, without, oh gosh, I forgot. We should see what they think. We should see what they're working on. And so sometimes that really does create a situation where they feel like they're not part of the team for a good reason. Clear communication, time zone, task management. Yes, task management for sure. The feeling of being in the loop. Yes. In particular, again, I'm going to say, Macy, that might be mostly with a hybrid type of a model. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then Jackie says collaboration, innovation, communication, engagement, fun. Yes, fun is harder on a virtual side. Not impossible. It's just a little bit harder. When people are 30% withdrawn, not all the way in, even in today's technology, there's just the briefest of time lags and overlap in conversation, which makes it just harder to have laughter and conversation at the same time. No doubt. Those are super helpful for me, and I'm going to use those comments as we go through the rest of the presentation. So thank you very much. I already covered this, so I'm not going to redo it for you, but there is definitely a big difference between what I'm going to call remote, which totally remote can be, by the way, it can be where most people are remote. Just usually that's not the case. Usually most people are in person, even in multiple sites with some small remote offices or a few remote people. Hybrid, I just said that backwards. Sorry. Hybrid is when most people are in person and a few people are off site. Remote, in my terms at least, I'm going to say everybody is working remote, and they're trying to solve solutions through technology only, okay, as opposed to having a hub to physically get together. That's what I'm going to call a remote team. And that big difference again is remote teams have a little bit of an advantage, in my opinion, of trying to keep their remote folks engaged, because the whole team is operating from the same remote playing field. And so every communication, every filing method, every documentation method, every pop-in method, every fun method, everything is designed with remote first in mind instead of second in mind. And that really does create a barrier for those of you folks that are trying to manage teams where 90% of people are in person and only 10% are remote, because most of your processes are in-person first processes. This was the question I asked you to put in the chat. So thank you for covering that, your biggest challenges, and I'm going to keep those in mind as we go. I was going to try to put them on this slide, but it didn't work out that way, so I'll just keep them in the chat. So today, I want to talk about solutions. What can we do? What is some general advice that leaders or that any team member can use to try to resolve those problems you guys talked about, to try to resolve problems with engagement, with participation, with time zones? I might or might not tackle that one directly. I mean, there's not really a great solution for that other than acknowledging the difference and having some flexibility in how we communicate, maybe some lag time built in, etc. I'm going to try to talk about how do we keep people that are not in the room engaged. I'm going to try to talk about maybe some documentation, task management kinds of things. I might touch on that a bit. And as we go, I will try to monitor the chat. If you guys have other comments, thoughts, things that you want to interject, disagree with, throw out other ideas, try to do that in the chat for me. I will welcome it. I might not catch it immediately, but I'll see it eventually. So let's keep going here. Solutions. So I want to give you some, I want to just be completely candid with you all. Those of you that have had considerable exposure to Mindset or Better Culture know that we lean heavily on 7 principles of leadership that we believe deeply in, that if organizations and their leaders will understand and embrace, have a mindset to make these 7 things happen on a consistent basis inside their organizations, we know it will lead to a more engaged, a more prideful, a more appreciated workforce. If you can do these 7 things, it will increase employee engagement. But these 7 things were written in 1991. They were proven at QLI. They've been proven with a whole bunch of clients since we started doing this consulting work for the last 10 years. But candidly, we had not worked with a lot of clients that were fully remote or significantly hybrid before 2020. And we had a little bit of a reality check moment where we had to say, gosh, our whole curriculum, our training programs, our models, everything is really built around with a bias toward building in-person culture. And so as all of our clients, as COVID happened, we're going fully remote, and we were in positions, we were halfway through leadership programs, we were in the middle of consulting contracts, we were measuring survey health for organizations. We had to ask ourselves, what needs to change? What needs to change about how we serve our clients, about how we help organizations do the two things that we said we care about, which is upskill leaders and build better company culture. And we kind of held our breath for a little bit because we're pretty invested in these 7 principles. And I can still remember sort of the get together that we had as we were examining our different programs, our different resources, our different consulting tools, our different other things. And we did make some changes, by the way. Today's presentation is a good example of that, I guess. But when we looked at these foundational 7 principles, these 7 principles of leadership that we've been teaching for more than 30 years, we had to ask ourselves, does this apply in this new age, in a virtual first type of culture? And so I want to go through these 7 principles with you, and I want to make sure that you see that they do, that these are universal truths of how you build a dominantly successful culture, regardless of whether it's in person or virtual. And so the first principle of leadership that we teach, that we believe deeply in, is if you're a leader of any kind, or even if you want to be a leader, if you're on your path, you should always be focusing on 3 things: the mission of your company, building a tight-knit, meaningful, intentional culture, and the consistent pursuit of excellence, of trying to help raise the bar on the performance of those around you, helping people do more than they think that they could do, okay? And that didn't change, going from in-person to virtual. Still the same things: mission, culture, excellence, okay? Second principle of leadership. Leaders create an environment where their team members feel proud of their company and know that their company is proud of them. This actually is even more important in a significantly hybrid or virtual environment, because when people get together in person and they communicate more and they share experiences, it's easier to control, or to at least anticipate, how employees feel about their team and their company, because you see them all the time. You get an easier impression of, are they proud of what we're doing here? Are they proud of what they're doing here? Do they know we're proud of them? Do they feel seen and valued and appreciated? Well, when somebody's virtual, you actually have to up your communication in order to do those 2 things, to build pride and to make sure people feel appreciated. So it's actually more important and harder. The third thing, leaders work hard to help employees be successful, both at work and in life. Now think about this in a virtual work environment. How do you show somebody that the organization cares about their success, cares about them, both at work professionally and in life? Again, when you don't see somebody in person, it's still very important. If you want an employee to be engaged, they need to know their company's investing in them, and they need to know that their company cares about what's going on in their personal life. Okay, so some of my advice here is going to tie back to that one in particular, about how do we make sure that our employees feel a connection to their team, to their manager, and to their company, and know that their team, their manager, and their company care about them. Okay, that's harder and therefore more important in a significantly virtual or significantly hybrid setting. Leaders must protect the right of good employees to work with other good employees. This matters no matter what. It might matter a smidge less in a virtual team, because if you work next to a real jerk in a physical work environment, that's going to nag at you every single day. If you're on a virtual team with a real jerk, you may not even notice them for weeks at a time. So there are some small advantages there, but I will tell you, accountability on performance and making sure that you don't have people that aren't contributing and carrying their fair share of the load is something that we have to pay extra attention to in a virtual environment, because we can have inequity as far as workloads on teams and not notice it as much if people are virtual. So we have to be a little bit more hyper conscious of that. Leadership principle 5, we try to encourage and promote open discussion before we make decisions. This one's, again, more important in a virtual setting. Employees want to know why the company makes decisions. Employees want to feel like, if possible, they had a say in those decisions. or at least the company cares about their opinion. And if they can't have a say, and if they didn't have a chance to express their opinion, they at least want to know why. Again, you're going to find one of the most important things in managing a virtual team that I'm going to get to later is communication. Communication, communication, communication. Helping people feel in the loop, right, was one of the comments that came in from, see if I can find who shared that one. I don't think I'm making that up. Jessica said making sure people feel part of the team. Maybe I'm making that up, but I thought someone earlier, oh, there it is, Macy, said clear communication and helping people feel like they're in the loop. Exactly. And so, especially on decision making and how we communicate about why the company made decisions, even more important. Number 6, leaders deal effectively with conflict. Conflict comes with the territory no matter what. You probably have a little bit fewer inflamed conflicts when people are sitting in all different places all over the world. But that doesn't mean that there isn't sort of passive or passive aggressive or conflict that people are spurring that's not out in the open, that's in a private chat or whatever that is. Conflict is very different in a virtual setting, but it still matters. And lastly, leaders work hard to help people enjoy their work. And somebody put this one in the comment as well of just, the very last one, Jackie, how do we have fun? And this is harder in a virtual setting, but no less important. People want to enjoy their work. They want to enjoy the people that they work with. And we just have to be a bit more creative and intentional and realize that there are some things that we have to give up when we're managing a fully virtual team, but that we can still have fun. So bottom line, that got a little longer than I was expecting, but the bottom line is we decided not to change one word of these 7 principles when 60% of our clients went fully virtual. We said, no, these things are fundamental to leadership. They're personal identity things that we want people to, this is how we want you to see the world if you want to be good at helping grow others and build culture. And fortunately, we did not need to make any changes in these, and in some we've even leaned into more. So I hope those are helpful to you, those 7 principles. It's hard for me to go through even a 1-hour presentation without talking about culture, pride, growth, dealing with duds, making decisions, conflict, and fun. They're so fundamental to what it means to be an exceptional leader. The rest of the presentation, I'm going to give you 5 more specific tips for managing hybrid teams, and then I'm going to give you 5 specific tips for managing fully remote teams. Okay? Feel free again to throw comments in the chat if you have thoughts or questions. The 5 comments, the 5 tips I want to start with first is for a hybrid team, okay? And hybrid, remember, hybrid in my world, and this is a generalization, but most managers or companies that are managing hybrid teams, the majority of that team, most of the time, is in person, and the minority is virtual, okay? So I'm going to operate most of the time from that assumption that you've got a nexus of in-person folks and a smaller percentage of hybrid folks. Tip number 1 for managing a hybrid team. This is fairly obvious, but it's important. Invest in quality communication platforms and equipment. Now, there are a lot of options out there. Most organizations have this dialed in pretty well on the one-on-one basis. So do I have a decent webcam and a decent microphone so that I can have a one-on-one conversation, or that I can jump on a Teams call with a bunch of other people, or that I can jump in a Zoom room? Most companies have that figured out. It's not expensive to get a halfway decent webcam and a halfway decent mic. What is harder is to manage that experience in a conference room. And this is the area that I advise organizations to spend the extra money, have a really experienced vendor come out and install some great, whatever it is. I'm not going to pick a brand name, but really good microphones that cover a room, where you're going to be having that same experience where, who was it that said, Jessica, who said for hybrid experiences, keeping people both online and in the room engaged. And I'll tell you, audio equipment is the number one thing that makes it really hard to have a physical group of people in one room and a couple people online. Now that can go, you can have 100 people in a room and 20 people online, or you can have 6 people in a room and 1 person online. The dynamic is almost the same, and the need for the equipment is almost the same, in that if that person online is struggling to hear because there aren't enough microphones placed enough in the room, they're going to disengage. They may want to engage. You got a couple people that speak quietly. You have somebody that gives a side conversation and they're laughing, and that's distracting. If you will invest in really good technology, you can eliminate 70% of that issue, in my opinion. You need a fast connection. You need really good audio. Video matters too, but audio is the big issue in my experience. And if you'll do that, you'll up your ability to have those meetings. Now, on top of that, you obviously, you need to take a breath in the room. You need to pull in the people outside intentionally. I think a good rule of thumb is trying to stop every 3 to 5 minutes and invite participation from the folks who are not in the room. And they may not have anything to say, but stop and invite their participation every 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the topic. Okay, sometimes that's much longer, sometimes it might be shorter, but don't make them interrupt the in-room conversation, because most folks won't be likely to do that. You treat virtual folks a little bit like you treat folks who are in a room, who tend to just be a little less likely to share their thoughts, right? When we're managing a group of 8 people and you got 2 or 3 people that really like to talk and 3 or 4 people that will usually have good things to say if you ask, ask. So ask your virtual folks to contribute, and usually you can strike a cadence that works fairly well. Let's see if we got any new comments there. Number 2, establish clear communication norms and expectations, okay? This kind of goes to the pop-in question, okay? So how do I communicate? What mode are we going to use? If we have some folks who are in person and there's a casual in-person mode, how do we keep the folks that are hybrid in the loop? What can we do as far as data repositories? Email is great. Slack channels and things like that can really work well. But even just simple things like, well, when is it appropriate to send me an email? When is it appropriate to give a quick phone call? When is it appropriate to shoot a text message? What other tools and things do we have that we can use? Okay, I really like phone calls personally. When I have remote team members, I'm regularly asking them not to IM people. I mean, do IM people, do send emails, but in addition to those things, also just call. If you're wondering, oh gosh, what do I do with this? Pick up the phone and call. Get better at sort of creating a pop-in, and know that the other person can't always pick up the phone, and that's okay. But attempt it. Attempt that sort of pop-in culture on a more consistent basis. And I think what you can create is the type of work environment where you kind of know when that other person's likely to be available, and they expect regular, not time-delayed touch points every day. I think that's healthy and good for teams, is to have your virtual folks literally, physically talk to someone, whether that's a Teams or a Zoom session or a phone call, at least daily. They're talking to somebody. They're not just passively reading email, passively putting things in a chat. I think that helps to create that connection, is that on a consistent basis, they're having live conversations with their teammates or their managers. Number 3, take an individualized approach. Early, before COVID, before all these other things, most of the reason that most companies chose to have a few people working hybrid or remote, etc., was because they chose to make an accommodation for a valued employee. They said, hey, look, we'd love to have you part of the team. We get that, you moved out of town, or you need more time at home with your kids or whatever. And so we're going to take an individualized approach, and we're going to try to give you a setting that works for you, a schedule that works for you. Most employers post-COVID have realized that they can adopt this mentality for just about everybody. if it's our goal to attract and build and motivate and keep talent, we as employers needed to learn to get a little more flexible and to say, look, here's what we need done. Here are the performance expectations. Here are the job expectations. But how can we make that a little bit individualized to you, right? I know in the comment we had time zones a couple times. Not only, do people maybe work different shifts and time zones, but if you've individualized your workload, you may be allowing, one person works like 10 to 6 p.m. and somebody else works 7 to 2 p.m. or, some people like to jump on in the evening. Some people like to take a long, lunch and a walk in the afternoon and they're off for 2 hours. Some people, this hybrid work setting creates a lot of opportunity, but no doubt it also creates, if you allow people that flexibility, which a lot of companies do, it creates more times when one person's online and the other person's not. And so we have to get better at asynchronous communication and finding ways where, yeah, absolutely, they'll get back to me when they get back to me, kind of thing. And so those norms and the tools that you use to implement those are really important. Okay, number 4, insist on individual accountability. So with increased autonomy needs to come increased accountability. This is a pinch that a lot of organizations and some managers got themselves in when they sent everybody off virtually. And they would ask me, they said, we're doing okay. Our metrics are okay, but I can't tell if some of my employees are really getting done what they're supposed to get done. And that's a problem, which gets to the 5th one, which is about trust. So accountability and trust go tightly together. What just makes logical sense is if I'm managing a group of people, I can give you more autonomy, more independence. I can let you set your own schedule. I can let you, work from where you want to work. I can let you do X and Y and Z. And I feel way more comfortable with that, the more that I trust that you're going to be accountable for what you need to get done. Okay? And so building accountability and building trust are essential when people aren't putting eyes on one another on a regular basis. Okay? And so how do you create accountability for someone who works in a hybrid setting? Typically, it's by being more explicit about, okay, so what does your day look like? How are you scheduling your time? What types of effort and input are you putting in? Now, some organizations really care about the number of hours worked. I'll tell you, other organizations don't. They just care about, did you get your stuff done? You could have worked 3 hours today. Maybe your salary, and yeah, you work 5 hours a day. Okay, are you hitting your metrics? Now, most people are working more than that. Most employers are insisting on that. But I'm just telling you, there are some work environments where people are really hyper-focused on, were you online for 8 hours today? But just be clear if that's what accountability means to you, be clear. If what accountability, on the other hand, means to you is, no, hit this objective, and this objective, and then you can sign off. That's great. Just be clear. What do we care about? Okay. Set clear targets, clear goals, clear expectations, and then make sure that your hybrid folks are communicating with you that they understand those metrics, that they understand how they're being measured, and they're giving you the information that you need to know whether or not they're being accountable to that. So when I work with a hybrid person, I do kind of up my communication expectation from them. I can't see when you got in this morning. I can't see, how many sales calls you made. Well, maybe you can if you have the right sales software, but you get my point. There are things that I can't see. And so if you want to build my trust, give me more information, communicate a little bit extra with me. Let me know what you got going on in your world. Okay. That helps with accountability. It also helps with the 5th one, which is trust. Trust is absolutely essential for those virtual team members, for the folks that work hybrid. And that frequent communication will build that trust. So if you have a couple folks that work hybrid, and if you're worried about them from time to time, have somebody try to work with them and say, hey, look, you're probably crushing it out there, but we have questions. Sometimes we're not sure. Can you up your communication quotient a bit, especially for a while? And what that can do is really help to build trust and make sure that managers know that people are being accountable. So those are my 5 tips for managing a hybrid team. We did publish an article on this on the Better Culture blog probably a month ago that has 5 more if you're interested. You can go to betterculture.com and click the resources tab, and it's probably like the second or third blog on the list if you want to go deeper on other ideas. Now I'm going to do 5 tips for managing a fully remote team. Okay, there are going to be some similarities here, and there are going to be some differences as we go through. My 5 tips for managing a remote team starts with number 1, back to that very first leadership principle that we talked about, and some of you folks in the chat that talked about creating engagement and creating fun, etc. My number 1 piece of advice for managers of a fully remote team is you got to work hard to build culture, to build relationships, to build identity, to build a team, right? As opposed to just a group of people that are all doing their jobs, okay? And that there's all the difference in the world between, yeah, there's 10 people, they're all individual contributors doing their jobs, versus no, this is a team, this is a unit, this is a group that has one another's back. And so the number 1 thing, and it's hard, but it can be done, is to really foster that connected and positive team culture. You want people to know who one another are. You want people to feel connected. You want people to know one another on a personal basis. You should know what they did this weekend. You should know what's going on in their kids' lives. You should know things, personal things. And so create some time, either as a full group or smaller groups, to make sure that there's continuously an actual team culture happening amongst that group of people. Number 2, as a manager, make time for one-on-one check-ins. One-on-one check-ins are more important in a remote culture, okay? If you have a fully remote team and you're managing 15 people, I know it's a lot on a manager, but you need to be touching base with everybody every week, okay? Or more often than that, okay? One-on-one touch base. Phone call, a Teams call, a Zoom call, whatever you want to do. And this can be 7 minutes, okay? It can be scheduled or it can be not scheduled. But a one-on-one check-in is important for a lot of reasons. It can help with accountability and trust. It can help with personal connection. By the way, when I say one-on-one check-in, it's not just like a project-based check-in. This is a personal check-in. And you can talk business too, but it's a touch point and a connection point. And if you don't do this frequently, at least weekly, you'll find disengagement is almost assured to happen. Okay. In the comments, maybe, those of you guys that are still listening to me drone on, if you have any advice for what to do with those one-on-one check-ins or how to handle those, I'd love that in the chat. I've had people ask me that question quite a bit over the last couple of years. I get it, I need to touch base, but like, what do I do with that time? Because sometimes it feels forced. Sometimes it's just work all the time. Sometimes that person's like, what are you checking in with me again on? And so if you have any thoughts or ideas on how to do those one-on-one, just touch base or check-ins, or how to set those up, or how you've seen it done well, that would be an interesting thing to have you put in the chat for me. Number 3, it's your job, if you're managing that team, to foster a team connection. And there are lots of ways that we teach this in our leadership programs. I just threw a few in here that anybody who's been through a mindset program or a better culture program is going to be familiar with most of these. But a few specific tactics that you as a manager should be using to build team connections are as follows. Number 1, be good at doing PR, public relations, PR, for your great team members. So for instance, if I manage a team of 6 people and Sam is just fantastic, always positive, like gets his work done 3 days ahead of time, our clients love him, etc. When I talk to my other 5 people on the team, and maybe they don't, we're all virtual here, okay, we're all remote, I'm going to make sure to brag about Sam. Be like, gosh, you guys talking with him on occasion? Every time I talk to him, he just lifts me up. He's got his work done 3 days ahead of time. I don't know how he does what he does, but I'm a massive fan of that guy, okay? I'm telling other people on the team about Sam. I'm doing PR for Sam. What that does is it actually builds relationships between those people. It informs people, well, why should I feel good about my team and my team members? And probably the next time those folks connect, they're going to share something about the PR I did. They're going to share that back to Sam. okay, and Sam, they're going to say, oh man, Brett was bragging about you the other day. Nice job, or whatever. Okay. What that does is what's called a secondhand compliment. So a secondhand compliment is much more powerful than a direct compliment. If I just went to Sam and said, hey buddy, way to go, keep it up, way to be 3 days ahead of time, way to, you make me feel uplifted and positive every time we talk, Sam will appreciate it, but he'll appreciate it even more if that compliment comes secondhand from somebody else on the team. Not only will he appreciate it more, but I will have built relationship between myself and my other team member, and they will have improved their relationship with Sam by conveying the compliment around. So secondhand compliments are super, super powerful. If you've never thought about that intentionally, you should. It's one of the most, if I was going to get dropped in to be a chief culture officer in an organization, it's probably the number one thing I would do, is pick up compliments in one place and deliver them back secondhand. Okay, I'm going to see what's in the comment here. For one-on-ones, let's see. Jen says, I always ask how they're doing and feeling. So just to check in, hey, how you doing? How you feeling, right? And what they might need help on, okay? So what do you need help on? Because a lot of times when people are remote, and if Jen could talk on my webinar, which I know is a little bit restricted, she'd be nodding her head and she'd be saying, yeah, absolutely. A lot of times people that are remote, they have questions, but it's a pain in the butt to get them answered. They can't pop in, they can't pop their head up. And so oftentimes there are things that they do need help on that they haven't asked about. And so that's a great question to do a check-in on. Denise says she has a one-on-one form that I have the team members fill out. Oh, this is good. In advance. So they can guide that one-on-one check-in. And I supply suggestions. We talk about things outside and inside of work. I love that idea. Like, hey, ahead of time, a process or a form that gets sent to you where it's like, hey, here's what I'm working on, or here's what's going on, or here's questions I have, or here's things I want to talk about, or things that whatever. Kind of asking the other person to do a little preparation to guide that conversation, I think is a great idea. I might have to advise other people to use that, Denise, because a lot of times managers feel like, okay, I got to call them. What should I talk about? If you put the onus on the other person and say, hey, we're going to connect once a week and I'd love you to help us drive that conversation, I can see how that would really help. So really good advice, Denise. Hopefully I interpreted that correctly. Another thing that you can do if you want to build that team connection is you can become a storyteller. Tell stories about the other people on your team. These could be personal stories, funny things. It could be work-related stuff, amazing work they did with a client, or the way they handled a tough situation, or just something about whatever. If you can become a storyteller about the people in your group and tell stories with love and with that are endearing, that make people laugh and smile, that builds team chemistry and it helps people feel like they know one another. And so again, with virtual teams, that's one of the big challenges. So if you can become a storyteller, that's a great way to do that. One last thing that we teach in a lot of our trainings is a concept called linkage, okay? Linkage is probably the number one best strategy that I know of to help people feel like their company cares about their personal success, okay? And here's what linkage is. Linkage is connecting two people together that have something in common. Usually it's a challenge or a problem that they're dealing with in their personal life. And if you got somebody else on the team that knows something about that or could be helpful with that, you just make that connection. So in your one-on-one, if you're talking with somebody and they say, gosh, how you doing? And they say, oh, not that great. I mean, my mom is getting up there in age and I'm starting to worry about her living on her own. And, I don't know anything about assisted living facilities or other things, but I think it's time to start having that conversation. Okay. Well, you may or may not know anything helpful to say, but if you manage a team of 10 people, there's a good chance that there's somebody else that's maybe been down that path before or that knows something about it. And if you want to show that team member that you care about their success, maybe that person's not on your team. Maybe they're somewhere else in the company. Say, gosh, I know that can be really challenging. Have you ever met Mark over in the marketing team? He was pretty open about that process. I remember 18 months ago or so. Would you have any interest in talking to him? And if that person says, sure, then you reach out to Mark and you say, hey, Mark, I've got somebody on my team having an aging parent. I'd love to try to support them. I know you've been down that path. Would you mind if I connected you two just to chat, offline or whatever? Mark 97% of the time is going to say, sure, absolutely. How can I help? You connect them, you link them, and you're done. It takes about 3 minutes, but I don't know a more powerful way to show employees we care about their success than to link them together when they could help one another out. So again, if you want to foster that team connection, etc., it's a great strategy that you can use. The last thing I'll say is I came across a formula for friendship a while ago. And this is not terribly scientific, but I do think it's in the neighborhood of correct. And if you think about the people in your life who you have really good relationships with, there are three main elements to building a deep friendship. Physical proximity. It's not essential that it's physical, but physical proximity sure helps. Okay. The amount of time that you spent together, and the intimacy of that time. Do you talk about real stuff? Like, are you, is it surface level, or is it like, no, we're talking about, things that really matter in our lives. And as you're trying to build bonds among a team, if they're fully remote, you can't have the physical proximity unless you have a chance to do quarterly get-togethers or, all company meetings, in which case spend quality time together, go do something fun. It's really important. But Zoom rooms and stuff like that can work. Like, you can simulate some of that proximity. The number of touch points, the number of times, the frequency and the duration of those conversations matter. I think frequency matters more than duration, but the time that people spend actually talking and what you talk about, the intimacy of that, make some time to share personal stories, to share something that somebody's going through that's tough, to celebrate things people are excited about, share some raw emotion, share some personal things. Those three things, proximity, time, frequency, and intimacy, are what create real relationships. And so think about those as you're creating opportunities for your team to collaborate and connect. 4 and 5, I'll do 4 fairly quickly, but making sure that you have, when you're fully remote, this is a no-brainer, but having a clear structure, because people do work more in isolation when they're either hybrid or remote. You've got to have really clear workflows, documentation, organization, help resources. You have to have a more robust build out of the tools and the resources and the trainings and things that people might need access to, because it is harder to just pop up and say, hey, what do I do with this? Or how do I, whatever. And so you have to have more structure, more clarity of thought, more workflows, more documentation to help support people. And what you will find, this is a tough transition for people, but what most organizations find is that extra clarity of thought and organization and structure tends to benefit the organization and the team as a whole anyway. And so it's actually one of the advantages that virtual teams have in terms of productivity, is because people, they have to get more clear on what everybody's accountable for and how they're going to move the ball down the road. They sometimes can be more productive and efficient because of the necessity of that clarity. Lastly, promote and discuss an appropriate work-life balance. There's a big spread on this one. There are some people that when they get a chance to work remote, their tendency is to take advantage of it. What's the least amount that I can work while making sure, I'm trying to get most of my stuff done. There are other people on the other side of the spectrum that, like, well, when do I shut it off, right? If I can, like, my work is right in the middle of my living room, right? And it's easy for me to just be on all the time or too much. You got to go back to individualizing. And, some people, you need to up their level of accountability and do more check-ins and make sure they're getting their stuff done. For other people, you may have to really encourage them to shut it down. Yep, that's great for the day, for the week. Let's talk a little bit more about what's going on in your personal life. Take that long lunch walk, do whatever it is. This is an interesting area because everybody treats it a little bit differently. But if you'll promote the work-life balance, it also gives you opportunities to talk about and to build the friendships and relationships and culture around what happened after you shut off work, right? And I think having those conversations, discussing what's going on in people's personal lives, helps to reinforce and promote that we care about you, not just professionally, but personally as well. And it builds that culture. So that's about what I've got for y'all. I'm saying y'all like I vacationed in Texas a month ago, but I'm not sure if that maybe it rubbed off today. When I do a presentation, I love to get feedback. And so if you are interested, you can pull out your smartphone and take a snapshot of this QR code. It's going to ask you a few questions about how I did, how my performance was, etc. And if you would like a copy of the slides that I shared today, when you get to that point, it'll just ask you to put in a code. Just type slides in, SLIDES, and it should deliver you an opportunity to access a copy of the slides and the points that we went through today, if you're interested. If you do go through that process, just know every field in there is optional. So like there's an email capture field, put it in if you want, skip it if you want. There's an opportunity to give comments on a few things. You can just skip them, or if you'd really like to give me comments, I always appreciate them. Feel free to drop them in there. So this is going to be up, the QR code. If you don't grab it right now, it'll be up on the closing screen as well. But I'm going to proceed, since we've got a couple minutes left, to just see if there's any general Q&A before we close things out. Any final questions from you guys? Feel free to put those in the chat. Thanks, Jessica. Emily, here we go. What are your thoughts on team building activities during Zoom meetings? Any ones you recommend? Anybody else on the call? I would love commentary on this one for Emily, because I have not myself managed a lot of these Zoom meetings. I've heard from clients a ton of different things that they've done over the years. I don't really have a list. You know, I know during COVID there was a big, you know, there's like, you know, your trivia games and your, you know, other things like that. You know, you ship people a cocktail mix and they mix it together and they drink them together, or you ship people food ingredients and you cook something together. You know, you can go bigger ideas like that. I try to focus on simpler stuff, which is just having good conversation, you know, good conversation starters. Jessica says she's enjoyed the share something in your home type of thing. And she also likes the online games. There's a big online game company that got real popular after COVID. Can anyone help me know what that is called? I feel like people were building game show type things into it quite a bit. If anybody can remember what that is. Yeah, I love the show and tell, like go grab something from your home or turn your monitor even if people are willing to show you their mess, you know, that kind of thing. Share something in your home is great. Show and tell, yep. I did a scavenger hunt once, like, you know, it was like a 20-minute timed thing and there were like 20 things and you had to, you know, I mean, it was stuff like a toy that you've had since you were, you know, 10 years old or younger, you know, a CD, you know, fill in the blank, just, you know, something like that, you know, a brand like Tupperware brand piece of Tupperware from, you know, the 70s or whatever, like fill in the blank, but like who could find just different stuff like that. And then you get people, you know, they run around their house for 15 minutes and then they bring a pile of stuff and it's kind of fun. I've seen that. It's kind of fun. Who has X nearby? Yep, like show me your pen, show me your pet, show me a hat. I love those. Great. Well, since I'm not seeing any other major questions coming in there, thank you guys for being here. It's always a pleasure to spend time with anybody who is interested in growing as a leader or improving their company culture. I should do a quick shout out for those of you guys that are still here. If you're here as a part of one of our Chamber of Commerce partnerships or any of our other association partnerships, please send a thank you to those groups for bringing these resources to you and to your community. From Brett Hogeveen and Better Culture, it was great to see you all. Thanks for being here. Have a great rest of your day.